So some people that are winning all the time, obviously they know their way around the tiles pretty well. And some people that aren't winning at all, I think part of it is that they don't know the card well enough. Part of it is they're not assertive enough. So what I say with this game is that it's 70% luck and 30% skill. And my job tonight, well, this morning, is to teach you the best that I can, how you can improve your game and improve your knowledge to get your skill up to the full 30%. Because 70%, you're not going to see three out of every four tiles, right? The other players get to pick the tiles. They may hold on to the tile, you may never see it. You're waiting for that south and it's been sitting on her rack the whole game and you'll never know. There's nothing you can do about it. But although there's 70% of the tiles you don't see, there are still things that you can do to improve your game. And as I said, the number one thing is to learn the card. Because the better you know the card, the better you know all the different opportunities that are out there for you. If you're afraid of hands that use three suits, you say, oh, it's too overwhelming, I don't know how to deal with three suits, you're missing out on a lot of options. If you say you're afraid of singles and pairs or concealed hands, again, you're closing yourself away from a lot of options. Don't be afraid of quints. Don't be afraid of any hand on the card. I'm trying today to give you some insight into the new card. I've also I put up a link in the very beginning of the chat. I put up the website for my blog, and you can read any of my old articles. It's really helpful. Some people are auditory learners. Some people are visual learners. Some people like to read and then reinforce it over and over again by reading it and coming back a few weeks later. The blog gives you that opportunity to read what I'm telling you today so that you can hear it today and then think about it, play a few games, then go back to the blog and reinforce it. So with that in mind, I want to talk a little bit about this year's card and what I do every year. If you go back on my blog page, you'll see that I write a big summary every year about the new card. It's like my favorite thing in the world. I got my booster the day that the new card came out. And I was like, I'm not even going to focus on the pain in my arm. I'm just going to start writing. It was a great distraction. Anyway, I write about each of the individual hands. And I also write about how they interact with each other and how you can learn to switch hands between, when you're forced to or when opportunities arise, you might want to switch hands between different parts of the card. This year's card is so difficult, I feel. It's not a simple card to learn. So the main thing that I'm going to be teaching you this year are some wacky little mnemonics that I created. You may like them, you may hate them. Hopefully you'll at least hear me out and see if they help your game. So, as I'm assuming that 90% of you have your new card. Hopefully everybody does, but once in a while somebody doesn't have their new card yet. But hopefully everybody has their new card. What I'm going to do now is begin my little slideshow. If I can, I don't know why I can't get this. Shoot. No, I don't want to leave. Oh, there we go. Okay, I wanted to share the screen. There we go. Okay. There we go. Come on. There. Okay. Tips and tricks. What I usually do when a new card comes out is the first hand that I look at is the first one in the consecutive runs, because that tends to be a major pattern on the card. But this year, they're driving me crazy. They're all over the place. If you look at your card, the first consecutive run hand is like steps. It's a pair, and then another pair, and then gradually you go up to pung, pung, kong. So it's like, there's my hand. You're going flat, flat, and you rise a little bit up to the top of the stairs. But if you go down to the first hand in the 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 section, it isn't that kind of a hand. It's more of a bell curve where the pairs are on the ends and it gets gradually, the highest point is the middle, and then it goes back down to the end to another pair. Usually those two hands are the same pattern of either both steps or both bell curves. But that was my tip off from the very beginning. When I looked at those two hands and saw they're totally different patterns, I said, okay, they're playing with us this year. They are not going to make it easy to learn this card. So that's why I'm telling you, it's going to be trickier than usual to learn. But in the end, I think we'll all get there. It might take until May or June, when usually we would have it done by the end of April, early May. It's going to take some practice, and don't be embarrassed. Look at your card when you need to, but try and fix it in your mind. Say, okay, no, that is a step this year. That is a bell curve, whichever it is, so that you're not spending your whole time looking at the card. Just get comfortable with it. Another thing that I like to remind people of are the simplest hands on the card. They're called pung kong hands, or 3-4. We have 3 of a kind and 4 of a kind. Everything can be called for an exposure. Anything can use jokers. They are the easiest hands to make. So every year they have a slight variation. This year they threw everything in. They have some where it's 2 pungs in a row, some where it's a pung kong, pung kong. There's no rhyme or reason to it this year. You're just going to have to learn all the hands. So that's what I'm saying. This year they're playing with our heads a little bit. Another thing that they've done in previous years was they had some consistencies in the winds and dragons section. They had something that I call the long E rule, where when you're playing with winds, obviously they're never going to change. The norths go with souths and easts go with wests. That's just a standard that has to stay the same. But usually they would pair them with suits and with evens and odds. That I call it the long E rule, that east wests would go with green and they would go with even numbers, but not on this year's card. This year's card, east west and north south. If you look on the card on the 5th and 6th wind and dragon section, you got north going with south, great, but then it's 3 numbers in a row. It's a consecutive run, which is, something we all like. We like consecutive runs, but it's neither even nor odd. It's both. It's the same idea, consecutive run with either north south or east west. So that's a little bit different, that they're not holding to that pattern of east west is east. I mean, east west is even, north south is odd. Nope. This year it's either of them goes with the consecutive runs. So like I said, it's a little bit harder to learn everything this year, but we'll get there. So another thing I always like to point out, and it's really important for defense, is knowing what are the legal and illegal exposures. And by illegal, I don't necessarily mean it's not something you'll find on the card. I just mean you'll never see it in an exposed hand. So this year, we've got lots of different combinations that are legal. We even have a quint of dragons, which is kind of rare. You usually only see 4 dragons, but they decided in that quint hand, the junk quint hand, I call it, the first one, that they're using a quint of dragons, and they're using the winds as just the calm. And I'll explain later why that's an interesting twist. But it's a quint of numbers in any suit, quint of dragons in any suit. They could match the suit of the number. They don't have to. So it could be 2 suits represented or 1. Keep that in mind. And then only 4 of a wind. So anyway, so we say numbers, you can see quints that are exposed, kongs that are exposed, pungs that are exposed. Obviously, we never expose a pair until the very end. Same with the dragons. We've got quints, kongs, and pungs. This year, we have pungs of flowers and kongs of flowers, no quints. And this year, in terms of a legal exposure, the only legal exposure is the kong of winds. There are some situations on the card that have 3 of a kind of winds, but those are all in closed hands, concealed hands. So if someone you're playing with puts out 3 winds, she erroneously exposed a concealed hand. So you can tell her that her hand is dead. You do it politely, but you can tell her, I'm sorry, that's not a legal exposure this year. So as a reminder, there are no quints of flowers or winds this year, and an exposure of a pung of winds is illegal. So keep that in mind. Everything else, all the different kongs, kongs of numbers, kongs of dragons, kongs of flowers, kongs of wind, all legal. You can do kongs of anything. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit. I was saying that the pungs of flowers, I think, are really great. Pairs are hard. If you don't have a natural pair, if you haven't started out during the Charleston, if you haven't accumulated your pair of flowers, I wouldn't say don't go for the hand, but I would definitely have a backup in mind, because nobody's going to necessarily throw you that second flower when you need it, and you can't be guaranteed you'll pick it from the wall. So a pair is tough, and a kong is tough, unless you have jokers. or you're already set up through the Charleston with nice flowers. The pung is the easiest of the three to make. So it's actually kind of nice that there are so many pung flowers on this card. And in fact, the double pung hands we're going to be talking about later, easier to make than you would think. And the nice thing about it is the flexibility that it gives you. They're always in an open hand. You know, you can call for exposures, you can use jokers. These hands are definitely attainable. Don't be afraid of, oh my gosh, it's 6 flowers. How the heck am I going to get them? There will be definite times you can get the 6 flowers using jokers usually, but you can do it. Okay, so that's my little spiel about the flowers. I know that we all know how important twos are this year. I was joking in my blog. I believe I said it's going to be another 89 years before we have this problem again. When we get to 2111, we're going to have a little bit of a problem when it's 2111. But if you're still playing Mahjong in 89 years, sei gesund. I am very pleased for you, but this is the year we should worry about right now that, oh my gosh, how are we supposed to get 3 natural 2s for one meld of 2022, let alone all 3 for that big hand? It is such a long shot. It's a big challenge. And obviously the number one thing I would tell you is don't pass 2s in the Charleston if you can help it. Seriously, if you have anything else to pass, I don't like to pass soaps. I never like to pass soaps, but I also am going to be very reluctant to pass a 2 this year, because anybody that's going for any of those 2s hands, the year hands, the more 2s they have starting out, the better position they're in. And certainly they need those 3 natural ones for most of the 2022 hands. Just there's one where they don't need it. So yeah, do not pass 2s in the Charleston if you can help it at all. I'm not saying stop the Charleston. I'm just saying find something else to pass if you can. I'd rather pass a pair of something than give away a 2. That's just how I'm oriented. So again, I'm just a reminder, you have to have 3 natural 2s. Because some people say, well, it's 3 2s. Can't you use a joker? No, you cannot use a joker. Must be natural. We got that. Everybody understands that. I mean, we've been playing for about a month now, so you should know that by now. Okay. A little bit more about the 2022 section. As I was saying, there's one hand that doesn't require the natural meld of 2022. It's a Kong Pung hand, where you can use jokers, where you can call for exposures. You don't even need all 3 soaps. They could be 3 jokers. You could do whatever you want. It's great. If you got a lot of 2s and jokers, go for it. And a soap or 2 helps too. A reminder that this year they moved the big hand up from the singles and pairs section. It's usually the final hand. Some years it's worth 75, some years it's worth 85. This year it's worth 85, but they've moved it into the year section. And there's an additional concealed hand in the 2022 section. That one involves wins. And this is one of those 2 instances I was talking about where you've got a concealed hand with wins where there are pungs. They're just not exposed. And because it's one of those bell curves where the middle is the 2022 and then either side of it is east-west, those are the pungs, and then the pairs are the north and the south. That's how you can remember it. You can say, oh, that one is a closed hand. It's a concealed hand, and I know that it's a bell, so the 2 closest in the middle are the east and the west. Those are the pungs. So it's really pretty simple to memorize that hand. It's just remembering you can't expose pungs. They have to be concealed this year, pungs of wins. Okay. And as I said before, if you have a choice, don't pass soaps or 2s in the Charleston. It's just handing somebody a better chance at making that hand. You don't want to do that. Here's a cute little trick that I always definitely encourage, especially once you've really learned the card pretty well. I always encourage people to have a backup hand in mind. And just looking at this card, I said, oh, there's a beautiful backup for one of these 2022 hands. And I'm going to point it out to you if you haven't figured it out already. Here's a little booby lesson for switching from the first 2022 hand to the second Winds and Dragons hand. I call it a complementary hand. You're starting with, you're going for this hand that's got the 4 greens, the 4 reds, and then you're meld in whatever suit you want. It could be BAMs, it could be cracks, it doesn't have to be in dots. It can be whichever suit you want for the 2022, and then a pair of flowers. But say as you're playing, you're having trouble making that pair of flowers, or you were going in cracks and you see that somebody has put out two cracks and a joker. There's no way you're going to make it in cracks now because you can't get 3 natural 2 cracks. What are you going to do? You're going to take your cracks and exchange them for the jokers. You take your 2 cracks, exchange them for jokers. Then you have the flexibility now to call for the flowers using jokers and call for the soaps using the jokers. So it's a really easy switch. I'm not sure it's too easy to switch the other way, to go backwards if you've got the reds and greens exposed and suddenly you pick up a whole bunch of 2s. That doesn't usually happen. But if that were the case, you could switch back the other way. But certainly switching from the year hand to the wind dragon hand is a really nice complementary hand. So in general, I always recommend having a backup hand. The nice thing about having that backup hand is you have the confidence then to know that you can switch. So you have the confidence to call for that first exposure rather than letting it go and maybe never getting another chance at that tile. For instance, if I've got, I know I'm going for that hand. I've got 2 greens and I've got 2 green dragons and I've got a joker. Excuse me. 2 greens and a joker. Somebody throws a green. Knowing that I have a backup hand, I'm going to call for the Kong of green dragons because I have as good a chance as anyone else of redeeming that joker and getting my joker back with another green. But if I don't call for it now, I'm going to need to use that joker later anyway to complete that Kong. So that's why I say, don't be afraid. If you've got a backup hand in mind, you have a lot more flexibility. You can have some confidence. I'm not saying go crazy. Don't put out all 3 exposures, not right away, but at least you can make a first step and be on the board and don't be afraid that you're stuck because you have this other hand as a clear backup. You don't have to worry. Nobody's going to call your hand dead and you can switch if you need to. Okay, so I believe, sneak peek, yes. Okay, I believe now we come to what's known as Booby going a little bit nuts. When the new card came out, I told you I was just recovering from getting my booster shot, so I'm a little bit loopy. And I looked at the card, and the first thing that came to my mind when I got to the even section, the 2, 4, 6, 8, there's a hand about 3, 4, 5, the 6th hand down, where it's pung of 2s. I mean, a pung of flowers, 4 2s, pung of flowers, 8s, a Kong of them in a different suit. So it's 2s and 8s in 2 different suits, but each of them has a pung of flowers. So what I thought was, oh my goodness, where do you see a lot of flowers? A wedding. So I said, okay, these are the corsages. The mothers of the bride and the groom are wearing identical corsages. I just got crazy with this whole wedding motif. So you are now cordially invited to learn the wedding hands. There are many of them following this whole wedding theme. As I said, Booby went a little nuts. So here was that first one that came to my mind. We've got the mother of the groom. She's in a lovely darker dress, but it's short, so it's a different style, different color, different style. So she's got her corsage, but she's wearing 2s in one suit. And then the mother of the bride is wearing a totally different kind of dress and a totally different kind of color. So she's got the 8s in a totally different suit, but they both have the matching corsages. So that's where this whole wedding thing started, was with the mother of the bride and the mother of the groom. And that's that hand in the 2, 4, 6, 8 section. I love it because you can use jokers for anything, can call for any exposure. And the very best thing about this hand is you could have 3 of those 4 exposures and no one would know what you're doing because there's several other hands that are going to fit that family this year. You'll see. We've got the flowers and the 2s, but she might be doing your opponent might be doing this hand in like numbers, matching bouquets this time, same number, but different colors. And that one I call the rainbow bridesmaids hand. All the girls have the same number, but they're wearing different suits, different colors of suits. So that could be, it doesn't have to be ones, it doesn't have to be twos, it could be sevens, it could be, personally, I think fours are the hot commodity this year because nobody wants them. If you see fours going around in Charleston, grab them. If you want to do like numbers with them, you probably will have a good shot. I feel like fours are going around a lot more than some of the other numbers. Of course, now that I've said this to every woman in Irvine, fours are going to be harder to get. But I just think if you see, just as an example, if you see them going around, grab them. If you have nothing else that's showing you, if you have no clear indication from your original tiles, that's something I would jump over to. Okay, so we have the difference here. Totally different numbers, 2 and 8, but it must be 2 and 8. This one, same number, whatever the number is, it's got to be the same number, still in 2 different suits. And then there's a third similar related hand in the consecutive run section. We have the Kongs, again, consecutive Kongs, different suits, but it's a Kong and a Kong. It could be 1, 2, it could be 6, 7. Again, with these corsages. So I was like, what is this? I said, okay, maybe the mother of the bride and the mother of the groom are a little friendlier. Maybe they're, so it's not so far apart. Their styles are similar, right next to each other, but different colors. So those 3 hands sort of interrelate to each other. You may be able to switch between them if you had to. Although, like I said, it's a pretty easy hand to make if you've got the jokers or if you've got a good lead. Especially knowing that you've got more than 2 options. Obviously, in like numbers, you only have 2 options. If you expose the 1 dots, you're going to say to yourself, well, I've either got to make it 1 bams or 1 cracks. But the other thing you can remember is you can make it 2 bams or 2 cracks, as long as you see you could switch between those 2 hands if you needed to, depending on what comes your way. Okay, so we've got all these flowers. We've got all this lovely members of the wedding party. But what else makes a wedding besides the people and the clothing? There's got to be dancing. So the consecutive run hand, the only concealed hand in the consecutive run section, I saw it and the first thing that came to my mind, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I said, okay, we're waltzing here. This is actually one of my favorite hands this year. It's not that hard to make because you can use jokers for almost any piece of it. The only tricky thing is figuring out, okay, exactly which is going to be my single. So as you're collecting tiles on a certain end of the number line, say you've got a whole bunch of 3, 4, 5s or 6, 7, 8s in several different suits, this hand could start to take shape for you. You just have to figure out, you have to have things on either side of that single tile. And the hardest thing about this hand, as you know, is it's concealed. So you can use jokers for anything, but you just have to be close. You cannot call for an exposure until the very final tile. But it really isn't that hard to make if you've got the fundamental set up pretty well during the Charleston or pretty early on. Just keep an eye out as your tiles are coming around. See if that's starting to shape up in your hand. One of the hands I like the best this year. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, another thing that to me, I thought it was a dance step. I talked to my son, who's a choreography and musical theater person, and he said, no such thing. So we figured maybe it's more of a sports thing. It's something I call a stutter step, where think about you're climbing a step. You go from the first step to the second step. You say, nope, going back to the first step again, first, second again, and then up to the third. So you're going 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And we've actually seen this hand before on other cards. This is not a brand new hand. It shows up quite a bit on this year's card. It shows up in 2 different places on the evens section. Shows up in the odds section, shows up in like numbers and consecutive runs. The thing to remember, the hardest thing about this is getting those pairs. The pungs and the kong can be called for exposure. The hardest thing is getting those pairs. And they're generally 3 suited. Although that 1 in the 2, 4, 6, 8s does have a single suited version. The main thing is just to remember how it interrelates. Obviously in the 2, 4, 6, 8, it's not 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. It's more like 2, 4, 6, 8 dragon, or 2, 4, 4, 6, 8. But there is a place on the card that repeats this in several different places. Familiar pattern, just remember there's 2 pairs and that you go back to them. So we've got our waltz, we've got our stutter step, we've got the flowers, we've got the dresses, we've got the dancing. We need the food. So there are a couple of sandwich hands on the card. The one in the odd section, I call it the watercress sandwich because it's a very delicate sandwich. You've got your bread on either side of it. You've got a Kong of ones and a Kong of nines in the same suit, and then a very thin filling, just singles in a different suit. So in this one, I mean, as it's written on the card, I believe it's greens and reds, but obviously you could use soaps. You could use any suit. But the idea being that the suits that match are the 1 and the 9 for the Kongs, and then the second suit is the singles in the middle with 3 flowers to complement it. And then the other one, we've definitely seen this card, this hand before on other cards. It's where you've got consecutive runs with the first and the third number, Kongs of each of those in the same suit, and then a middle of pairs of all 3 suits of the same number. So it could be pairs of Kongs of 4s and 6s with pairs of 5s in the middle. Could be Kongs of 6 and 8 with 7s in the middle. Pair, pair, pair. And because it's all 3 colors, you know, red, green, and black, I'm saying, oh, it's a BLT, which not a Jewish wedding, but that's okay. So we've got our 2 different sandwich hands. I'm just trying to have ways for you to remember the hands this year because this is a tough card to learn. I've got all these silly little ideas. As I said, if you are looking for this sort of thing, there's even more of them on my blog that you can look at. I'm just trying to have you think creatively, whatever's going to jog your mind to remember, oh, I seem to have a lot of, you know, I'm collecting numbers on the number line. I've got a lot of 6s, 7s, and 8s. I've got almost all the pairs of 7s, and I've got 6s and 8s in one of the suits. I should go for that BLT hand. Why not? The more you think about the hands and how they interrelate and what they should look like, the better prepared you are when those tiles actually show up on your rack. And that's the whole point. We want you to be ready. That is Bobby's plan. She says, luck favors the prepared mind. So that when you get the good tiles, when you get that final tile that completes that third pair, or when you get that extra joker that helps you call for something, you're ready for it because you have learned the card, you know how the different hands interact, and you're ready to make a hand. So now I'm going up to the win section to remind you again what we said before, that it's a little different this year. As I said, the East go with the West, the North go with the Souths. Kongs are the only exposures you see. And I'm going to do a quick little commercial for that Quint hand and tell you why, for once, I'm encouraging people to be bold in wind exposures. Because generally, when you're doing a wind exposure, you're like, oh, no, I told everybody that I needed North, so they know I need Souths. Or I put out 4 West, so they know I need East, and everybody's going to hide their East. The fact is, this year, there is an exposure in the Quint section, just a Kong, just one wind. You can put out those 4 Norths and nobody's going to know whether you need Souths or not because you could be going for that Quint hand. So it's actually a little, I have a little more security in putting out my 4 winds without worrying about people, you know, hoarding the matching wind. Somebody was saying that they would throw winds pretty early. I would agree. Get rid of your winds because especially in these hands that need 1 single East and 1 single West, if you've only got a single East or West to throw at the end of the game, that could very easily be somebody's winning tile. You know, there's a lot of people that say, well, I can account for 3 on the table, so I'm going to throw this. It's fine. Nah, there's a lot of single East and West in this year's card. So I wouldn't want to wait until the very end to throw an East or a West. Okay, so in summary, I want you to familiarize yourself with all of these all these patterns, some of the ones that I talked about today and some that are in my blog. There's just so many different options this year and there's no one clear way to do it this year. So you're just going to have to get familiar. And the best way to do that is play a lot with your friends, but also play online, just with the bots, just to get familiar with different combinations. But if that's a little overwhelming for you, the best way to start when you really don't know is to just stick with the old reliable hands that you know. The ones that don't need pairs, the ones that are an amalgam of all sorts of junk. Those are the ones I call the junk hands. There's the first quint hand, or the one that's 3 Kongs in a row in the consecutive run section in 3 different suits, because it's a mess, but it's an easy hand to make. Any like numbers hand is easier to do than most of the other hands. And likewise, consecutive runs in 1 suit. Because I know, like I said, some of you are afraid of 3 suited hands. It takes a lot of getting used to, but over time you can get exposed to it. I know some people say make them on your rack. Just practice looking at what it looks like to say this in bams, that in cracks, that in dots, just to get familiar with what it's supposed to present itself as visually, so that you're familiar when it starts to show up when you're doing a Charleston. And the other thing, as I was reminding you, always have a backup hand if you can, especially when you're going for an exposed hand. If you're doing concealed, nobody knows what you're doing anyway. But when you're going for an exposed hand, always make sure that you have a backup hand in mind if you do need to switch. So these are the final words from both of you that I was mentioning earlier. Only expect to win about 20% of the time. Don't worry if you don't win one day, you'll do better the next time. If you cannot win, if there's like four picks left and you're nowhere close, don't lose. It's better to break up your hand and play defensively than throw somebody their mahjong tile, because there's no shame in a wall game. And the final thing, even if you're not going to win this hand, don't worry, there's going to be another hand in about 5 minutes. Just go with it. Everybody pretty much ends up winning at least once during a session. And like, I'm giving my little commercial here. If you don't win like regularly, if you've been playing with the same group for months and you're never winning, I wrote this book. I certainly have these blogs that are available for free, but I also wrote this book that might help you improve your game. So with all of that, I'm giving you the link to the blog again. Totally free. Always happy to hear from you. This is my email. Please send me an email if you like an article, if you have any questions about it, if you have questions in general. I'm always happy to answer. I usually get back to people in about 2 or 3 hours at most. You guys are West Coast, so it might be overnight, but I love my job and I love talking to people and giving them mahjong tips or whatever they need. So I'm always available to you. I'm going to open it up for questions now. Were there any in the chat?
Yes. Let's, so you're taking down, okay, hold on. So.
Oh, let me get out of there.
Okay, let me just see.
Oh, hi
what the
Katie. That
first
was very
one
sweet of
was.
you to put up the blog thing. Katie, what are you doing? Katie lives like 10 minutes from me, and yet she went all the way to California to join you guys.
Okay, here it is. Okay, so
Oh.
Katie put up this, or Karen put up your last blog, right? I see that
Right.
in there. And then there's a
can link to it,
question.
yeah.
Well, what's the name of your book?
The book is called Searching for Bobby Fischer, which of course is a joke on the chess maven Bobby Fischer, but it's caught on. My idea at the time had been that I wanted to get better and I wanted to find a woman who was like Yoda, but for mahjong. And I figured she was a grandma and that she knew everything there was to learn, and I wanted to know what she knew. And of course, there is no such person, but at the time, what did I know? I was very naive, and I figured somebody must know this game perfectly. I don't think anybody does, but I think we all try. And this is the time of the year when we can. I am going to see if I can find a copy of the photo of the book. How do I not have a cover? Oh, anyway, I don't even have a picture of the cover of my book. I'm sorry. But you can buy it from me directly if you just email me at the bobbyfisher@gmail.com, or you can buy it on Amazon, or there's a Kindle version too if you prefer to read things on Kindle. But remember, it's Fisher with a C. That's the tricky thing.
Always a trick. So let's go to gallery
Okay,
view.
so I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this year's card or strategy in general. Great.
Yeah, I just thought we'd put it on gallery view. So if somebody wants to raise their hand, you can unmute yourself. I can ask you to unmute. You can go into the reactions and raise your hand. You can put it in the chat. It's a lot to think about.
$58 of us.
58.
I had to fly here from New York.
Who has a question?
Ann Kupferman.
Oh, and yes, hi.
Okay.
For some reason, my picture left. I don't know why.
Aw,
Share
Okay.
video. There we
Yeah.
go.
hey,
Someone told me that the easiest hand in the quints is the second one down, the 2, 4, 6, 8. What do you think?
it depends on what tiles you have.
Well,
I
it's
mean-
easy to, maybe it's easy to switch over if you're playing 2, 4, 6, 8 and don't have any flowers.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's a very flexible hand. If you've got the jokers, it's a great hand. The only reason I question their opinion is that twos this year are hard and
Yeah.
pairs of twos are especially hard. And that's the only reason I think that they can justify putting it in the quints hand, because I think it's not that challenging. It is a pretty easy hand. It's just that because the twos are so hard this year. I don't know. That one doesn't grab me though. It's so funny. Everybody has favorite sections of the card. And I am the first to admit that I never play 3, 6, 9s. It's just not my section. But 2, 4, 6, 8s don't really do it for me either. I love that first quint hand. You know, whatever it is
Oh,
every year.
yeah.
Some years it's 5 flowers. Oh, there's my book. Thank you, Doris. That is
Thanks.
what it looks like. Doris has a photo. If anybody's got Doris on their page, they can see it's.
I even signed it.
Yes, of course I did. And that was a long time ago. Now
I
I've.
was at the Las
Oh, Elaine's
Vegas.
got it too. Thank you. Wow. No, but I love that. I have been known to go for that quint hand, the junk quint hand, with I have no jokers when I start. I'm like, I'm going for it anyway. Because I know that over time, you know, I'm a math nerd too. And I do stats when I go to tournaments. I keep a record of what I'm dealt and what I think I'm playing at the end of the Charleston, what I end up playing, and how many flowers and jokers I had at the end of the game. And just mathematically speaking, you're going to get in every deal, on average, you're going to get 2/3 of a joker and 2/3 of a flower, which means sometimes you'll get 0 and sometimes you'll get 3 and sometimes you'll get 1 or 2. It just nets out to being 2/3 on average. But I know that even if I'm not dealt any jokers, chances are pretty good I'll turn up with 1 or 2 of them. And especially when there's a quint of flowers for that junk hand, it's easy to get it's not easy to get a quint of flowers, but it's possible to get a quint of flowers without any jokers. So you really only need 1 joker for that quint hand. Likewise with this 2, 4, 6, 8, in theory, you really only have to have 1 joker. It is possible to get that Kong of 6s naturally. So those are the kind of hands where it's like you don't even need jokers to decide that you're going for that quint hand. You just have to have faith that that joker is going to show up when you need it. Between exchanging for something that's been exposed and picking it yourself, you're probably going to end up with a joker by the end of the game. You know, chances are there's 8 of them. So chances are pretty good that you're going to, by the end of the game, at least get 1 joker. And if you're going for singles and pairs, that's the one you had to throw away. It's heartbreaking, but if you're determined to make that singles and pairs, you're going to have to give it up.
There is another question.
Okay.
Would you also recommend we not pass the east and the west in the Charleston?
Yeah, if you have the choice. If you've truly got 4 or 5 tiles to choose from, yeah. Given the option, I would hold on to those rather than something else, and then I'd throw them right away, like as soon as the game begins. So don't pass them, but throw them right away. And I used to say that about flowers, but I don't say that this year about flowers because there's so many of these pungs this year with the flowers that I say, you know, obviously never pass flowers if you can help it, but don't throw them right away because there's something, Tom Sloper coined this term, joker bait. If you have a pair of something and you wait a little bit into the game, maybe 10 or 12, you know, everybody's picked 10 or 12 tiles and people are getting pretty close. If you have a pair of something, you can throw one of them with the hope that somebody calls it for exposure using jokers, then use the second one to exchange for that second joker. For that, you see what I'm saying? You've lured out that joker and now you're exchanging for it. So flowers are perfect joker bait in this card. I wouldn't throw them so early because somebody probably already has her flower and joker ready to call for that super early on. And if you don't have joker bait, if you only have one flower, don't throw it yet. Hold on to it in the hopes that someone else will lure out that joker.
Hmm.
Doris.
Yeah, along that line, I'm finding that if I have 3 flowers and I'm doing a hand with 3 flowers or 6, if somebody throws a flower, I'm gonna take 2 of mine and put it out with 3. But
Exactly.
then,
Don't waste a joker.
right, but then if you need 6, people start throwing them, and if you don't have a joker to get the second flower, you're out of luck, because I don't want to waste a joker, but when you throw them too early, people start throwing them right away if they don't need them.
That's true, but you're gonna have to take that chance because at some how are you gonna? You'd have to accumulate the 6 somehow anyway.
Yeah.
So at least you got one more natural joker. I mean, one more natural flower by calling for it.
Yeah,
You would have been even further behind. You would have only had 3 in your hand if you never called for it. But now you've got 3 out on the rack plus still 1 in your hand. So you're closer than if you just let those flowers go. Then you're
Mhm.
still only stuck with 3. So at least this gets you a little closer. That's my rationale anyway. I'm good at working backwards to justify what I did. No more questions?
I'm
Has
looking to
anybody
see.
has
No.
anybody gotten close to making that big hand yet? Has anybody tried it? Or they just like, nah,
No,
it's
I
such a
did make the third one down with the 4 flowers.
yeah.
I've done that and made it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually what I tell people if they think that they're gonna go for the big hand and it's just not happening. I tell them to switch to the one that you mentioned. Because that
Mhm.
one, as long as you have one natural 2022, that one's pretty easy to make with jokers.
Right.
You can always supplement. You've got your 2s, some of them you can use jokers or call for the others. And it's just a matter of getting that Kong instead of a pair of flowers.
Right.
But yeah, that's a nice hand. No other, has anybody
Anyone
tried
else?
those? No more questions? I was gonna ask if anybody's tried for that concealed 13579 hand yet. Kind of a weird one.
Oh, yeah. I went on that one too,
Good, good,
yesterday.
excellent. As I said, if things come up in your game, if you have any questions, if anybody actually in human game, not on an online game, but if anybody during a human game makes that big hand, please contact me. I had promised Johnny Levine up in LA has a big mahjong page. And I told her we had a bet going on. It was sort of like in Trading Places where the 2 brothers had the bet about what was going to happen. I bet her that somebody at some point this year will make in person that big hand. I said it's not going to happen right away because it's too hard, and most of you are too smart to let it happen, but it will happen. And I said the first person that makes it, if they can get their opponents to attest that yes, Janine or Lisa or whoever did indeed make that hand, I'll send them all 3 of my books. So
Wow.
fine with me, because Johnny doesn't think it's possible. I said I think it is. I think it is. I don't think it'll happen right away, but it'll happen. Yes, Judith.
Unmute, unmute. Can't hear you.
I'm
No.
looking for who it is.
It's Judith.
It's Judith Zuckerman. She's not unmuted.
Let me see if I can help her.
Oh,
There.
okay.
Okay, good.
Jerry, I just don't want you to feel overwhelmed because you're first learning, and to hear all of this in 1 hour is a lot of stuff. So, yeah.
I actually understood most of it, believe it or not.
Wow,
So
wow.
Leslie must be a really good teacher
She
because
must.
I've only had 3 lessons and
Wow.
she's really explained it. Not that I could do it, but I have the comprehension.
Well, that's the beauty of having those articles is that when you have played a little bit, go back and read them. They'll make a little more sense to you. You know, it might not sink in the first time, it might not sink in the second time, but being able to read it at your own pace, maybe you'll say, yeah, I get it. But it's helpful to have it in writing so that you're not like being bombarded with all at once. Now, Susan has an interesting question. She says, is the dark ink black or blue? That's a good question. It does look kind of bluish,
It's
but the
blue.
idea is just, it's not red and it's not green. But good question.
Yeah, yeah.
Kathy Verreyer has a question, if I may.
Sure.
Thank you. Karen, wonderful presentation. We
Thank you.
appreciate all your efforts there. Two quick questions. One is, can we somehow get a copy of the slide presentation?
Yeah, I can send it to Jerry. It's a PowerPoint. I can send that to Jerry and she can distribute it, or if you contact her directly, she'll send you just a copy. I don't think everybody's going to want a copy.
Okay.
Well,
as I
we're
said, a
recording
lot of-
this. We're
Oh, that's
recording
true,
this,
too.
so we
It
have,
is
we
recorded.
have it for you. If you would like to check it out, we keep it on demand and on JCC website. But you can
Perfect.
ask me
Okay.
for it and I can send you the link too.
Right, but also
Okay,
Kathy, like
great.
I said,
Thank-
the articles, I literally go the left-hand side of the card, the middle
Okay.
of the card, the right-hand side of the card, and I discuss every single hand. So if that is something you'd like to look at, it's everything on my blogs is free. You can look at it at your leisure. You can look at it 6 times, whatever works for you.
Okay,
But
wonderful.
all of that
Thank
is
you.
available to you to learn the card, because that's the whole thing. We all want to be better players. I'm not saying anybody, I don't understand these women that are like mind readers, that you pass them something and they're like, they know exactly what you're doing. That I'm not that player, but I do want you to be ready to play your best game. And the way to do that is to learn the card. So that's what I'm doing. I'm teaching you the card.
And relative to learning the card, you had mentioned some helpful hints of playing in person, practicing online with the bots.
Mhm.
Have you, since you're a math nerd, we'll call it, is there a certain way to learn the pattern recognition? Is it the helpful hints with the quote wedding as your theme?
That's just me being wacky. I think the main things to always remember are that no matter what, every single one of these combinations is going to add up to 14. So the most common combinations are 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, or 2 and then 3 sets of 4. You see what I'm saying? Or 2 5s and a 4. So those kind of patterns per se, if that's what you meant by, what is it? What is a hand composed of? The melds, each of the components of the melds has to add up to 14. So like most of the singles and pairs are 7 sets of 2. It's just, if that's what you meant, or did you more mean how numerically it goes? Like 2 4 4 6 6 8, like that is, what did you mean?
Yeah, the kungs, the pongs.
Oh,
So the first part of the answer. Yep.
oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Remember, everything, regardless of what you're doing, is going to add up to 14. So, get familiar with the idea of the pair of, it's usually a pair of flowers with 3 4 of a kinds. So for instance, in the like number section, that third hand down, instead of it being all 3 suits of the same like number, it's 2 suits, and then the third suit, instead of being the number, it's complementary dragon. But you still know that, well, it's 3 different suits with the pair of flowers, so it's 4 of each of them. So you sort of work backwards from the 14 to tell yourself it's a pair and then 3 4 of a kinds. So it's like numbers twice, but then the third one, instead of being a number, is a dragon. The third suit that's represented is dragon. The other 2 are just the numbers. But because you got that pair of flowers, that's the easy way to remember it, is it's 14, it's 4 4 4, and a pair. So that's
Got
why I'm
it.
saying always remember 14, and that'll make it a lot easier to remember patterns. That's what I think. Other people have their own ways. I don't know. I mean, it's so funny. More and more people are writing articles these days. And I felt like, what makes me different from everyone else? And I think my wacky images are what make me a little bit different than all the other articles you're going to read, because everybody's going to tell you, oh, there's a lot of 2s this year. Yes, we know that. But I try to bring in something different. So I bring in the wedding or the sandwiches or the whatever I can think of that's going to make you think of it a little bit different and hopefully stick in your mind so that you can learn the card better. Whatever works. We all just want to do our best. One of the things that I generally talk about is that this is a social and a cognitive boost, but it's also an emotional boost. And we all feel so good when we win. We don't always win. We know that. But when you win, it's like you get this satisfaction that you achieved this goal. All your friends are there. They're like, yay, you. And, you know, you throw in the tiles and you do it again, but at least once during the session or twice or maybe 5 times, you made mahjong, and it's just such a great feeling. So I want everybody to come away from every time that they play at least winning once and knowing they could do it. It's really important.
There's another question that came in. Does Charleston go clockwise and game counter?
Wait, where, what?
Uh,
Charleston goes clockwise and game counterclockwise. Oh, okay.
oh, game counter clock. I see what you're saying.
Okay, the
Okay.
Charleston has this funny little rhythm to it. It's right across left, left across right, and then an optional across. So it's neither clockwise nor counterclockwise. I think what you're saying is, does the picking go clockwise? Let's see. Picking goes, we pick in a counterclockwise way, right?
Mhm.
I go and then the person to my right and then the person to her right. So that's always counterclockwise. But the Charleston is right across left, left across right. So it's neither, it's both counterclockwise and clockwise.
I think she's talking about the
The
picking of
walls
the
coming out?
tile. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I guess
It's
the walls
opposite.
come out clockwise, don't they? The walls come out clockwise, but I'm not thinking that right now. That
It's-
right now,
It's opposite.
somebody else who knows.
Clockwise, counterclockwise. It's just opposite of the picking.
Okay. To
Hey.
rattle you. Oh, Susan Delaney.
Yes.
I will tell you a story. Susan Delaney says when somebody says they know what you're playing and they're just trash talking you like basketball. I told you I keep stats at tournaments. And one of the things I do is at the end of the Charleston, I say, okay, I think I'm going for the evens hand number 3. Literally 50% of the time, the hand that I'm playing at the end of the game is different than the hand I thought I was playing during the Charleston. So
Mhm.
anybody who tells you at the end of the Charleston that they know what you're playing, well, with me anyway, they're not necessarily right, because I do change my hands quite often.
Mhm.
I thank you.
So-
I'm Susan, and I thank you for that, because we have one lady that does this to everybody, and she kind of freaks us out. It's like, what is she, a witch or something? She knows, but no, you have to kind of dismiss it. Thank you.
Yeah, you do, because honestly, that's what I tell people is know the card and be ready to switch your hand. Because even if Josephine across from you knows that, she's passed you a bunch of 7s and she's sure you're playing like number 7s, she doesn't know that you also happen to have some 5s and 9s in your hand, and suddenly one of those hands makes itself much more attractive to you and you switch over to that. She may think she knows what you're playing, but she doesn't know every single thing that you pick after that. And the fact that you are willing to change your hand to reflect the tiles that are coming in, you just threw Josephine off. That's good. Don't let her psych you out. That's good.
And there's another question. How would you handle a player who takes jokers off of other players' racks, even though she's been asked not to?
Oh boy. I've seen people slap other people's hands. They're like, no, don't do that. Sometimes you gotta be just, please keep, especially now that COVID's come and hopefully is on its way out, hopefully, you just say, please, I will hand this to you or I'll put it on the ground for you, but I really don't want your hands all over my tiles. If she's really obnoxious about it, I don't know. It's hard to say. Is it a group of people you play with all the time? Is it a stranger? It's an etiquette thing. I mean, just in general, what do you do when somebody's rude? It's tricky. You could just say, please, we're all going to be saying, may I have the tile, please? And then I guess model that behavior so that she knows that the rest of the 3 of you, that's how you play. And hopefully peer pressure, she'll realize we're going to use manners here. And hopefully she'll fall in line with that.
Katie Albert's advice is game goes to the right and walls go out to the left.
Okay, so walls are clockwise and the game is counterclockwise. Thank you, Katie. I just don't think that way. I'm not a visual like that particular thing, directional. That's not where my head is.
Okay,
too
so
busy
our
thinking
time
about
is
weddings.
almost up. So any last questions? Your last
If you think of
opportunity.
anything, you can
Okay.
always email me. Happy to hear from you. Just say, hey, I was in Irvine and had a question for you, and I will definitely respond.
Thank you so much. I just also wanted to announce again that our next Mahjong event, which is a speaker and then an afternoon of Mahjong play, that's a lot of fun. You can come with your friends. You don't have to rotate. If you don't have a group to play with, we'll find you a group. And it's with author and Mahjong novelist Barbara Kroon. And she's going to talk about her series of Mahjong mysteries. And then we'll have a lovely day. And that's on September 15th, Thursday, all day. And then in December, we have Michelle Frizzell coming, and she's going to give us more information on playing the Mahjong game and honing your expertise. And then we're going to follow it with a day of play and a Hanukkah boutique. So we have a lot of good Mahjong things coming up, and I thank you all for participating, and especially Karen for analyzing this and giving us this information. We really appreciate you, Karen, and we hope one day you'll be coming back to visit us.
Oh my
soon.
God, twist my arm. You have the most beautiful facility. I have to say, I was all over the country and I just,
Oh,
the Jerusalem stone and gorgeous,
Oh.
gorgeous facility.
well,
I'd
thank
love to
you.
come back.
Thank you.
And I also want to say we have a lot of beautiful people here.
Oh,
I
no,
mean,
the people were
beautiful
great. No, I had a ball.
inside and out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would love to come back to Irvine anytime.
Well,
Once
thank
life
you.
slows down.
Right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.